as the P&G Alumni Network Black Forum. We are a group all about engaging and connecting. You will see here images from our P&G Alumni Global Conference that was held in DC. And in DC, something really special happened where individuals came together and really united over a common bond formerly with P&G, and then also the forward-looking motion of saying, how do we unite as a community? Building on the momentum from DC, I have the pleasure of, as a P&G Alumni Network board member, of coming in and really thinking about how do we continue that momentum. As you think about the vision for the Black Alumni Forum, here really talks about the key pillars for the forum. They include engagement, so really being able to provide immersive experiences that encourage active participation and meaningful interactions. Also, bringing in workshops, discussions. Today's is one of many as we think about really bringing engaging discussion in which we can come together. Secondly, it's about community building. So, really being able to cultivate a strong sense of support and collaboration as fellow alums. And it's about the info exchange. One of the things as I think back to my time at P&G that I really enjoy was that feeling of being a part of different networks. One that I remember was the African American CMK network. It was a place where we found strength. It was a place where we could share with one another as we grew in our careers. So now, even outside of P&G, we have the opportunity to keep that spirit going. I would like to shout out others who are on this journey as we think about the forum leadership. So I would love to highlight, we have Jessica Hall, Kevin Grandison, Tyel Hayes, and Dr. Valerie Renee Shepard, who have stepped up in partnership in making this forum a reality. So thank you for all of the efforts of that team so far and the work that we will do moving forward. I really want to ensure that this is a two-way discussion. Understanding the chat is disabled today, but as you think about how we stay connected on LinkedIn, there's also the opportunity to go into the alumni network page, and we have a forum page. So would love to stay connected. I'll also drop my direct information so that as you have ideas about future topics, we can keep the conversation going. Now, for today, we have a group of heavy hitters who will really be our voices for today. So I like thinking about it as who are today's voices? Well, um, as I would like to just take a few moments just to explain to you who we have joining today. So first, we will have Samuel Monnie, who really talks about himself as he was once a reformed marketer and now he is a marketing reformer. He is the co-founder and co-CEO of Purpose Hive, which is a purposeful growth strategy and solutions firm based in New York City. So he brings deep expertise in scaling trust, building culture, and driving transformational growth. His career really spans several different senior leadership roles, which include being at, P&G, Braun, Campbell's, Granger, and Safeway. Excited as he kicks us off today, where he will be spending some time talking us through the global perspective as we think about the changes happening in DEI. In addition to Sam, we also have Judy Ellis, who is currently Senior Vice President and Global Head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Consulting at AMS, where she leads an advisory practice that helps organizations re engineer talent systems to expand opportunity and reduce structural barriers. I am excited as she comes today and leads us through a discussion of several different topics across this landscape. And we also have Gia Calhoun, who is a user experience researcher and founder of Twist of Fate LLC, which is a boutique event planning company. Also, she has had early career roles at P&G through inroads internships and 8 years in sales of CBD. And then she also spent time in consumer insights. Today, she blends her three passions, studying human behavior, creating customized celebrations. She's an executive at Target, and she is a super mom to her 5-year-old daughter. So, with that, I am excited to turn it over to Sam, who will kick us off today as we go throughout our time together today.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. I'm excited to be here today, and it's a moment that I've been really looking forward to. I've got a few slides just to kick us off. So when that screen builds, I'll be able to get going, and hopefully you'll soon be able to see see an opening slide. So I'll give it a little moment to boot up. Can you see a slide? Hopefully you see something which says opening remarks, Samuel Monnie.
We're with you.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll start today with a little personal story as we tackle this topic. I mean, I've been in corporate settings where there was an overwhelming sense that some of the leaders were merely checking the DEI, checking the box, really, box checking DEI efforts. On one occasion, I think after about 15 minutes of a 30-minute conversation with the vice president, it was just really awkward. He'd been adamant on meeting with me. It was just odd. And I just realized, what's this awkwardness? And it wasn't actually my imagination, but he'd been given the homework to speak to someone Black. And it was kind of job done. He could report back, task completed. And it just felt superlative, sort of performative, and superficial is the word I was looking for. And perhaps situations like this are catalysts for the pushback that we're seeing. And so, the relief for some that we can get back to the good old days. But we're seeing DEI, and I share that story because it's why I'm really committed to doing it and doing it well. And we see DEI in a shifting landscape. So right now, many brands are publicly quiet, privately watching, gripped by friction, fear, and fatigue. And there's this anti-DEI crowd. It's getting louder, it's getting relentless, and they're wanting to turn the clock back. And unfortunately, we've seen companies like IBM and Deloitte sunsetting their initiatives, and which is causing harm, disappointment, and just frustration. And we're in this era, yet the backlash has actually sparked pushback. And we're seeing so many companies where 98% of shareholders, so shareholders care about their money, right? This is what they care about. But companies like Merck and Apple and Levi's and so many more, they've said no to anti-DEI proposals. So we are seeing people actually believing in it and supporting it. And so one of the concepts that you'll hear me say, and I'm really passionate for and believe that will help us move forward, is integrating these into what we call purpose-driven DEI. And companies that do it well, it's the alignment and integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion into a company's core. It's part of what the company does. It's in its DNA. So it's not a standalone or performative or compliance tactic like that horrible story I started off with, but it's actually a proven catalyst for innovation. It drives trust. It drives good growth. And it's about the company and organization. It's a positive impact on every person internally and externally an organization interacts with. And it's the idea of weaving purpose into the DNA of the business, which creates this emotional connection, brand loyalty, trust, retention, quality of work, engagement, and it leads to more revenue. It leads to business performance, business impact, and sales. And so this defining purpose-driven DI, the way I like to define it, is the integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion into a company's core, into its core values, into its core brand values and purpose as a means to create meaningful impact. And it's a driver. It's absolutely a driver of revenue, of innovation, of organizational culture, and sustainable long-term growth and performance. So if that's what purpose-driven DEI is, I love this example from Lush. This is taken from an article I wrote, and I'll share more about that later. But It's about their courage to rename. And Lush is this cosmetics and beauty brand that has a global footprint. And what they did is they took a clear stand. So they renamed 3 of their best-selling bath bombs. So they changed thermal waves to diversity, um, Sakura to equity, and American Cream to inclusion. So they renamed those products. And what that gave them was a deeper community tie in a culturally inclusive campaign that was actually accessible at retail. And what they did is they showed global solidarity because these products were rolled out worldwide where they could amplify this message. And this is core to Lush. And what it meant was that from business side, they get to strengthen their reputation as a values first brand. So they're just walking the talk, they're showing up, and they're reinforcing the employee pride and engagement and belief and commitment and excitement and participation within the business. And one of the things they do, 14,000 staff almost, they're all members of the Employee Benefit Trust, which is a trust that 10% of the company is owned by employees. I think they have 5 members on this board, and the employees are core to what they do, and their ERGs have grown by 17% according to their last annual report. But also from a retail perspective, then they can actually differentiate their proposition with cultural relevance. There's a visual on the right-hand side of what stores look like. So they can drive traffic from their conscious consumers who are more engaged and want to spend money with their beliefs and their values. One of the things they do is they donated almost £7 million to grassroots donations from this initiative and all the others. But what it gives the consumer, the shopper, the buyer, the person walking into the store is representation and affirmation at shelf. You see yourself, you can see these words, literally buy these words and not feel as if there's anything wrong or offensive or defensive about them. This is something you can own, and it's enabling them and the consumer to align their purchases with their personal values. We know from data, I think there's some Harris and Axios data that says 40% of people shop or have made choices based on their values. And what another thing, a benefit of this product line is, they come naked, which is about 64% of their products aren't in packaging, which again has a positive impact. So they're allowing the consumer to buy in, participate literally in this idea. So as I conclude this point here, it's about activating your DEI through commitments, through brand action. Brands, businesses, organizations can actually do this. And it's firstly starting with respecting your discerning and conscious audience, because they're watching and they're remembering how you truly live your values. They've also seen, and this is an example of a solution that was designed and built with care, creativity, and brand relevance. So it wasn't a reactive thing. It was actually crafted to serve their consumer, their shopper, their communities, their employees, their stakeholders. And this was absolutely done in line with their action plan, which is linked to their business. So this wasn't just a performative thing or a stunt. It was actually, or a performative tactic. It was actually seamlessly embedded and integrated into the brand experience. And the part that we should always remember with things like this is it's prioritizing progress over perfection, because too often brand leaders, they're like delayed, discouraged, and distracted by the pursuit of the flawless solution. And this was an example of them taking action on something that was perfect for them, right? But it was about progress, because your audience wants to know, are you showing up for them with consistency and authenticity, or are you just when it's convenient? And I think this is an example of earning trust through meaningful actions and not just superficial ads, because it's treating people as co-creators in this movement. And so this is from this little presentation. It's from an article I've actually written in WARC. So if you've got access to WARC, there's an article called Marketing That Meets the Moment that you can access and get it. If not, reach out to me in LinkedIn. If you're already connected in LinkedIn, ping me or message me, and I can send you the link, because I posted it on LinkedIn, and you get access to the article and the PDF through the LinkedIn post I did a few weeks ago. So you reach out to me, or if you can't find it, I'd love to share it with you. And thank you very much. I appreciate having an opportunity just to kick this off. And as you can tell, I'm excited, I'm energized, and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to stop sharing and handing it back to Kendra.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Some things that stick out for me as I think about what you just shared, really thinking about the progress over perfection, thinking about the importance of respecting Our audiences, our customers, our employees, the respect extends respecting ourselves in doing this work. What we'll also do is drop into this chat the link to the article, or at least to the LinkedIn post, so that everyone has it here. At this point, I would like to transition over to Judy so that we can get into the mix of this discussion. I am excited. So, Judy, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Kendra. Sam, you mentioned a lot of interesting things, and I think linking it back to business performance is so important in this era. And Gia, I'd like to come to you first. You've long been a champion of DEI inside the organizations you've worked in. Would you be interested, please, in sharing what continues to motivate you to show up for this work, especially in times when it feels like maybe the spotlight is dimming?
Yeah, thanks, Judy. So it wasn't until 2023 where my actual title included anything that had to do with DE&I. But throughout my career prior to that, and I continue today to take any opportunity that I can to make sure that different groups are represented and thought of as we're making business decisions. So that could have looked like, when I'm doing research, making sure that we have representative samples of various groups. It looks like me being a little bit rebellious and including models who are Latino and Black in my presentation for some of our beauty products. And it looked like me speaking up for some younger Black employees who didn't necessarily understand what was happening, and making sure that they set a precedent, because if they let someone tell them, we'll just call you Gia number 2 instead of their actual name, that sets them up for a bad situation. So correcting that in real time in a meeting to make sure not only did that person know, this young Black woman, but that everyone knew that it wasn't okay, and Gia wasn't going to sit by and let that happen. And then finally, I'll share, I was on the planning committee of a holiday party where we had a warehouse full of Latino and African American employees, but the corporate side was not so representative. And I remember a meeting where we were trying to be more inclusive to our warehouse friends. And the team leader pointed to 2 Latino people and said, well, you 2 are Latino. Can you just tell us what kind of music they would want? And in that moment, I stopped and said, no, they are not the representative for all Latino people here. And just like you're not the representative for all white people here. So let's make a more equitable decision and have a sign-up sheet where they can put down songs that they would be interested in the break room, for instance. And let's make sure that is how we capture information. And so on the back end of that, those 2 Latino people did thank me because they were just frozen in time and didn't know what to say, but also didn't feel empowered to speak up for themselves. So I share those examples to kind of get back to why I do it, because it's needed. It's so necessary. And as we think about everything that's going on in the world, everything that's going on in our country, I have to believe that the only way to make a difference is for us to stick up for each other and to stick together. I very much believe that silence in the face of evil is acceptance. And so I'm going to speak up because somebody has to, and somebody has to know that it's not okay, and people aren't afraid to. So that's what motivates me to do this work.
Thank you for sharing those really personal and impactful scenarios. And in real time, what I hear is that you're not afraid to stop kind of course of regular business and say, let's address this. This is not really appropriate, and here's why. and that building in those inclusive behaviors and teaching kind of in the moment, I'm sure really makes a difference for the entire culture. So thank you for sharing that. Sam, I'd like to come to you. You've talked about your approach really being purpose-driven DEI, and you've touched on it at our opening, but could you share more about what that purpose really looks like for you today and how you stay anchored when the headlines aren't all like the article you've written, but they start to turn negative?
Yeah, I think first of all, I have to honor some of what we just heard from Gia, because I don't know, I guess I don't have a poker face. So if everyone's watching me, it's like I'm shaking my head. It all took all my energy not to say stuff. It's like, really? Gia number two? How rude. And so one of my mantras, I guess, is how do I stay anchored is trust your intuition. Is one thing. So through everything, what are you feeling and thinking, not inside? And I think a lot of us have an intuition and a sense, and many of us have been in that position where it's been, oh, I wish I'd said something. So no, trusting your intuition, and therefore, if you trust your intuition, the other thing I always anchor myself in really is speak truth to power with power. And that is not necessarily for everyone, but it's where I've landed with speak truth to power with power. And you know, you can study books on power and how it flows and all these things. And I say that because if we believe we have power, we do. And I'm not just naive and expressing that in, you know, I obviously understand roles and people have privilege and you know, the intersectionality. So I'm not saying this is for everyone, and I'm not being flippant, but that's what I believe. And I think the headlines are going to be headlining. And so it's important for us to tell the stories. It's important for us to be tellers of truth, success stories, which is why I tell the Lush story, being global, showing global examples of how things are rolling everywhere. So just to make sure that we see the world and you know, I'm a more optimist. I'm a realist, but I'm more of an optimist. So uplift people, uplift us, and prove it's possible. If we can show proof, show examples, show evidence, tell stories it's true, then there is evidence. You know, my other phrase, I have a lot of phrases. My other phrase is bringing evidence to an opinion party. So there's a debate going backwards and forwards. You'll see me through this, and I've actually written down some stuff because I want to quote numbers and facts. Here's my evidence. Where's yours? If I respect your opinion, here's my evidence, right? So if we're having an opinion versus evidence debate, then we can, I think, have shape a conversation more successfully.
Thank you. I'm going to steal that. I'm letting you know in advance. Bring evidence to an opinion party.
See, it sounds good. It sounds good, and it gets the other person, and it's like, yeah, that's all I'm doing. I'm just bringing evidence to an opinion party. It's like, what did he just say? Yeah, because a lot of people have opinions, but
yeah.
they don't actually have stats, facts, data, or lived. You know, just show me, tell me, prove it. Where's it? Give me a source. And it's amazing when you ask simple questions like that. But anyway, that's me. I'll get off my soapbox for a little while. I'll be back soon.
Thank you. Gia, coming back to you, and I will preface this by saying we appreciate you speaking for yourself personally, not as a representative of your company, but you've been candid with us in our pre-planning about what it felt like to witness Target's shift away from DEI commitments. And again, without speaking for the company, would you share with us what that moment really taught you about trust and employee voice and just your overall perspective?
Sure, absolutely. Again, Gia's perspective. So I'll share kind of my perspective on how things happen. I joined Target in May of 2025. Fast forward to November of 2025, that's when Walmart announced that they were going to be rolling back DEI. In that moment, you know, I'm reading articles, I'm trying to understand what's happening, and I tell my team, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to say, this is like to double down on what we stand for, right? So we are inclusive, we support LGBTQ rights, we're building business with Black entrepreneurs. I'm like, we can go hard on this. This is great messaging. And then, unbeknownst to me, in January, Target would come back. and rollback DEI. And so for me, the first thing I felt was egg on my face, right? Like just 2 months ago, I'm going hard saying like, we should play off of this and build on this because this is what Target stands for. Obviously, we would never do this. And I was wrong. And that's what it felt like to a lot of consumers. Like, wait a minute, I thought like you stood for this. I thought you were supportive, and now you're going back. So I will say, in an ideal world, if I were CEO, my employees would have heard about this from me internally before hearing about it on the news. In an ideal world, we would have had conversations internally, in our internal meetings, but also like, let's have a special meeting because this is a big deal. Ideally, I would have given my leadership to cascade down some key points that were more than just fluff or more than just things to satisfy people. And I would have also listened, right? So it would have been a two-way street where I really would have wanted to know how employees felt about this change and made it clear how they would and would not be impacted by it. Also, when my employees would not have heard that I met with Al Sharpton through the media. If I were CEO, they would have known that ahead of time. But also, if I were CEO, I would not have met with Al Sharpton because I would have talked to employees before. I would have leveraged our ERG group to talk to my African American and Black employees so they can tell me he is not relevant at all. Do not go talk to him. Here are some alternatives that you can do that will be more impactful. So yeah, I have been frustrated. I've been disappointed. I have felt kind of gaslit in knowing when we're having discussions about the business, you're talking about headwinds and getting back to retail basics, which yes, have impacted your business, but like, let's be clear about what it really is. So it's been disappointed that those conversations are not happening. I can tell you, I've been happy to see that the conversations are happening, at least in various ERG groups in our Slack channels. I think it was a missed opportunity to leverage the ERG groups before making this decision. But then even in the backlash of it, there were just so many opportunities to listen and figure out a path forward that wouldn't have been so detrimental. And I guess I'm still a little bit hopeful that at some point, even with the new CEO who isn't really new, that maybe some things will shift in the future. So still hopeful.
Thank you for that. And I think a through line I'm hearing from both Sam and you is that element of hope, which I think kind of empowers us, is having that future focused belief that things can and will change, which gets you through the rough times and really empowers you to be willing to step up and step into that space where we need to be courageous. So appreciate you for sharing that. Sam, you've highlighted that the backlash isn't just affecting ethnicity and race related initiatives, but it's affecting all kinds of dimensions of diversity, like disability, mental health, and even more. Can you talk about the risk to real business outcomes when companies choose to retreat from inclusion holistically?
Yeah, sure. I was in Manhattan a few months ago and I was looking for somewhere to grab a coffee. And so I found this coffee place called Café Joyeux, or which, if you're a French speaker, that's supposed to be, I said the word joyeux, which means happy. Apologies for my very British accent. And it was a place that is unique and special. So over 8 million people in the US have intellectual development disabilities, and 80% of them are unemployed. And that's exactly why Café Joyeux was founded. And so you hear these people use DEI hire as a pejorative and start laughing. However, this is a space that is being very inclusive and providing employment opportunities for, I just said 80% of people from this community of 8 million people in the US are unemployed. So that hateful, spiteful DEI hire is, would those same people also shout that at the employees in Cafe Joyo? That's my question to them. And the story of Cafe Joyo is fascinating because it's a Captain Lanzarac. He's an French entrepreneur. He was on a boat, no accommodation spared, all the details, all the trimmings, bunch of passengers. And so 30 people on this boat, and a young man with Down syndrome named Theo asked the captain, "Captain, do you have a job for me?" And then the atmosphere suddenly changed because the captain, everyone went silent looking at the captain. The captain said, it's complicated, Rather than be defensive, flip that, opened up a coffee shop chain in France and various other countries, took that and flipped that into an innovation that is creating a space for people. So when you're challenged as a leader, what do? Do you recoil, or do you actually, yes, you may be a bit defensive, but what if that could become an opportunity? So that's one example. But then, me bringing evidence to an opinion party. So then the facts are, we know that people that had this Harris poll data that says 43% of people have changed their spending based on their morals and their values. So this affects what people spend their money on. It affects sales, because there's data for from the Unstereotype Alliance that says there's like a 3.5% lift from ads that are more inclusive than non-inclusive ads. And over 1 to 2 years, that rises to 16% sales lift. And therefore, you're 3.5% short-term, 16% over the midterm of your sales if you're more inclusive in advertising. And Mars did some analysis of their ads using these tools, 200 ads, and they said, oh no, look, the ads with more women in the ad have stronger sales performance. So Mars as a business says, if we have more women in our ad, we sell more. That's just, that's what the company says they do. So maybe you're just going to have more women in ads because you make more money. So that's just from the capitalist perspective, right? And then from a reputation perspective, there's data that shows, there's some data from Axios that Costco and Apple and P&G are increasing their reputation scores, and Tesla and Google and Target, their reputation scores are declining. So we can't necessarily correlate and say it's because of their DEI practices, but it's interesting. The companies which are keeping it and talking about it are performing well in the reputation of brand, and those who aren't are losing. And then let's get into costs or being less competitive. So we know that 84% of employees are engaged when they strongly believe their organization values diversity, versus 20% of those when they don't. We know that employees who don't perceive DEI commitments from their company are 3.3 times more likely to leave within a year. So more likely to go if they don't believe after it, like, you don't really care about this. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams, more likely to perform above average profitability. That stat's been around for years. 80% of Gen Zers prefer to apply for companies that support neurodivergent employees. Like 1 in 7 of Gen Z declaring themselves as neurodivergent. And there's a great program by Microsoft with folks with ADHD or dyslexia or autism, have a hiring process, and they create a work environment that is more inclusive to meet their needs, such as coaching and resources. And Microsoft are doing that because they're raging capitalists, because they know that a lot of the roles they have in coding and data and some of these roles, there is a predisposition for people who are neurodivergent to actually be the top talent. So in Microsoft, the top talent isn't Harvard or Yale. It's who is best able to do really well at this job. And it's people from the neurodivergent community. So we're going to make sure we get a lot of those people and hire them and create conditions for them, because we get the best talent. So this is not a charity thing about, oh, those poor dyslexic people, what can we do? It's like raging capitalism is performance, and it's also DEI in action, right? So these aren't mutually exclusive things. And hopefully some of those data points reaffirm and reassure us that the truth and the evidence is there on the side of these things. So I know that, being a Black man in America, a lot of the topics I will cover and that I face are to do with race, but I'm giving examples of people who with intellectual disabilities, or I'm giving examples of people who are neurodivergent, because we need to think about the totality or gender representation of what this actually means. And in each of those cases, you're either going to make more money, sell more, get the best people, keep people. These are all business decisions that CEOs, C-suite care about. And I think framing it in those terms from my side makes it a compelling conversation and not a nice to have, please, may you consider type dynamic.
I think that's such an important point for all of us, leaders and organizations, to remember, is to frame things and speak the language of those that we're trying to influence. And as you said, if you're a raging capitalist, it makes sense. And having those stats at hand and those case studies that can speak to that is so important. You know, you've described yourself as a reformer who speaks up even when it's hard. And I'd love if you would share some advice for leaders who may be afraid. We got a note in the chat kind of along these lines, a question. What advice would you give to leaders who may feel a little intimidated about saying the wrong thing, who may feel muzzled right now? I know we talked in the pre-meeting that there's a lot of factors, even PR firms, impacting my presence on LinkedIn. So feeling muzzled or perhaps not able to speak up, what would you say right now to help people?
From my perspective, and again, I'm giving advice for those who this feels right for them, you know, speak truth to power with power, trust your intuition. And I've learned that this will stand me in good stead. And your evidence and your story, your voice, your message can come from lived experience, qualitative and quant data. Use all of those to make your case. Because I've been in a room when I've challenged a piece of creative, advertising creative, that I said, look, this is reinforcing a negative stereotype and problematic to Black audiences. And there's like 12 people in the room. CMO looks around and says, Sam, you don't look happy. And I said, yeah, if I was CMO, I wouldn't ran the ad. He ran the ad anyway. So when this happens, it's not just disappointing. It's, you know, broken. It feels like broken governments, missed foresight. You feel bad. You feel that my voice doesn't matter. So last week, there's a brand which is owned by Colgate-Palmolive called Sanex. And so I tell the story of how I raised my voice and they pressed it. So the UK regulator banned an ad that said that it reinforces stereotype that Black skin was problematic and white skin was superior. And this wasn't, so now this is not a subjective problem. They had to, they did an ad, they ran the ad. Now they've got to pull the ad, which is wasting money. They've got to do a new ad, which is more money. They've had the reputation and trust damage because, you know, they look bad. They're probably going to have more checks and balances going through. And all of that is now time, effort, money from something that I am convinced that was raised in the same process. So the same situation I talked about. What if I'm right? Now you have an example, Sanex, which is a Colgate-Palmolive brand in the UK. It cost them time, money, effort, brand reputation from perhaps not listening and not doing that check. And so these is about embedding the right cultural foresight and governance and the courage to hear and the humility to hear the uncomfortable truths before they become costly mistakes. So everyone listening on this, at least now you have that example to say, what if I'm right and you're wrong? So in the past, it's been hearsay or opinion. But again, here is evidence of, well, let's maybe not be so rash to dismiss or don't deny my lived experience. Maybe we should do some more research or a test. There's things that we can do because these failures don't have to keep repeating themselves. And that's for me why I do what I do and I say what I say. You can learn and take the right lessons from the missteps that are happening because it's about credibility with the C-suite, it's credibility with employees, credibility with investors and with customers. And it's great to have examples and proof of when those mistakes cost you or those mistakes make you. And therefore this is something to advocate for. But again, I'm not saying everyone should do this, but know that there is evidence and data to support your perspective.
Thank you for that. And it reminds me of a client. I had an ad agency and they had a piece of creative for, I'll just say, a nut brand that had some Asian flavoring. And they realized after it had gone to market that something in their visual press was off for the market. And so they instituted ultimately like a DEI review board for their creative. So it's like a step in the process. So we don't have to have everyone come up with this new learning. You know, I'm a big proponent of creating the system so they unearth any problems in advance so that they could get input from people and say, hey, have noticed this. Do you realize how you have this laid out has this meaning in these nations? And you might not want to do that. And Gia, I think that speaks to something you've talked about, which is that ERGs and internal communities are often underused when companies face public backlash, or even when they're considering going to market with creative or other things that might have an issue they're unaware of. Could you share more about what leaders might be missing when they don't tap into these voices, either before or after a decision?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll do that by giving you a couple of examples. I think I shared Target as an example of what not to do, missed opportunities to leverage your ERG, but I have had some experiences where the ERG was leveraged. So when I was with State Farm, I was conducting research, and one segment of the research that we wanted to talk to included LGBTQ. We had never done research with that demographic before, so there was no precedent. And so for me, the first thing I did was tap into the Pride ERG. I conducted a survey with them, and then I also had some one-on-one interviews with them to understand, hey, what's the right language I should be using? Is there anything, sensitive that I should be careful of? And then really understanding how this demographic is experiencing life events differently than those outside of that demographic. And so that shaped my research. So first, for the ERG employees, like the Pride group, they were ecstatic. They talked about how State Farm had never really acknowledged them broadly. They were proud that their company was doing research with this particular group. And so they were, I guess it had a dual effect where there were internal benefits, but then on the outside for my research, I was able to use the right language both in the recruiting and during the sessions so that participants were comfortable having these discussions with me, even some really tough discussions, as you can imagine, on how they navigate the world with life events, with things like gay marriage, when as there's a lot of opposition to it. I'll also share when I was at Clorox, and this is bittersweet for me. We had the African American ERG, and we were asked to look and find some opportunities for acquisition, maybe business opportunities that we can come up with ourselves. The world was open, but we wanted to grow with the African American demographic. So I led a multifunctional team. We did our research, and ultimately we said, hey, hair care is a huge opportunity. It's always going to be a huge business among this demographic. And we recommended, hey, Clorox, you should purchase Shea Moisture. Well, they looked at it, and ultimately they felt what Shea Moisture was asking was too much. They didn't feel like it was worth that much. So they ultimately decided against purchasing. And then a year later, Unilever purchased Shea Moisture for that amount. And so it was frustrating because, yes, we had the opportunity. I love the fact that we had the opportunity to identify something for the company that was going to be a big deal, bringing lots of money for our demographic, for African Americans. But obviously, the fact that we don't have control over the ultimate bottom line and how much you feel like you want to pay for something. But again, it identified a great opportunity for Clorox. So that's where, again, leveraging the ERG resulted in some positive results.
Thank you for those examples. And sometimes it just makes you cringe when you see the kinds of things that have happened and you go, who did they ask? Why couldn't they, leverage the people that are there and would have had more lived experience to share? This just won't fly. I could have just eyeballed this and shared with you. But it's not obvious. All the institutional knowledge that we share because of the backgrounds that we have that are unique and different, they actually are a business opportunity that can be tapped. So appreciate you sharing that. Sam, one of the things we've talked about that we share working across global markets, and where you are seated, I think you have a unique opportunity to have seen companies outside the US really take a more embedded approach to DEI, which you touched on early on in your discussion today. Could you share some of those lessons with us that you've seen where this kind of embedded approach has been successful, and really share what US leaders might be able to learn from that?
Yeah, I can answer that, and I think I'll keep my answer brief because there's a question in the comments about people, being tired of race. I'd love to, if we can make time to answer that, because I've got some thoughts on that. So I'm going to speak less on this one to give us more time. I think if this community is ex P&Gers and P&G alumni, then I think most of them or many people here will have a similar lived experience, because I have not been US based. I was based I'm from the UK. My heritage is Ghana. I've worked in Switzerland headquarters and then in Germany. So I was responsible for European products. And I was used to having 8-10 languages on the packaging. And I lived in Switzerland, and legally you had to have Italian, German, and French on every item. So for me, it's quite on a bag of sugar, mayonnaise, candy, whatever it was, had all 3 languages. It was possible. So the idea that you can't do it, or you can't include more, you can't have Spanish in US packaging, it makes no sense, because it happens everywhere across geographical borders and countries all the time anyway. So that's kind of, for me, a decided thing to do. And I think global companies like the P&Gs of this world, they already know it and get it. You can't not do it, because you just won't sell as much, or you won't comply with local regulations. So I think for P&Gs, it's a common concept of having multiple languages, or acting globally and thinking globally and acting locally. That concept, I don't think is new and different. And then depends on where you are. So when I talk about DEI from a global perspective, in some cultures and countries, it's less of the topics of interest for companies and brands may be to do with migrants, maybe to do with refugees and employment, maybe to do with stigmatized people, stigmatized groups, such as people in drug recovery. Or a really interesting one for me through my career is, I'm not a parent myself, but they're actually being able to, from an employee perspective, accommodate and be respectful and also support parents in the workforce. That's a huge thing that companies should and will be doing. But it brings me back to a time when I was on the Thermoscan brand in the UK, and I was European head of that brand, which is an ear thermometer, which is a Braun appliance brand. And the messaging was targeting mothers and babies, mothers and their babies. And in the Nordics, I got into a lot of trouble, because that was like, no, that's discriminatory. It should be parents, not mothers. Why are you targeting mothers? You got to talk to parents in this geography. And that was years ago, and that already rewired my brain, thinking, why are we targeting mothers? Parents can look in or caretakers can look in different ways. So I think those moments for me were intrinsic. I think for some of us on here, we actually have an advantage, or a life experience that gives us context, understanding, and perhaps more empathy to be positively disposed to some of this, versus why should I do it? So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, thank you. And I will come back to you, Sam, with Tiana's question in the Q&As, which she says she loves the points from you on the business case, and Gia on educating others, but it can be tiring consistently providing additionally unpaid labor when companies consciously disregard the data. Would love your point of view.
You want that now? Yeah, I can go, but Gia, do you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah. For me, it comes back to my why. Why am I doing it, right? Absolutely nothing that I do with passion is for corporate America. It's for me, it's for people I care about, it's for women, it's for Black people. I want all Black people to win. I am rooting for all Black people. And so when I come with that perspective, that is what motivates me to keep going. And like you said, is absolutely unpaid labor, emotional labor, But at the end of the day, I'm pushing towards something more. And that's why I keep going. I will also say, from my background as being a researcher, right? I've made all kinds of recommendations that leadership has shot down, not because it's the wrong thing to do, but because they don't want to spend the money, because they don't like that response, or they don't like that packaging, or whatever it might be. But I'm still coming from a place of this is the right thing to do. And as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, despite how it's turned into dirty words, at least here in the US, it's not the wrong thing to do. So that's another reason that I push to continue pushing forward, because that's just what I'm passionate about in making a change. I do live by leaving a place better than when I found it. And so a big part of that for me is through diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, I'm the same vibe. We are the kindred spirits, but equally, I get it. Unpaid labor. I use the expression vindication doesn't pay the bills. So it's like, oh, you did listen to me, and like, yeah, that doesn't pay my bills. So I am very conscious of when I raise things. I called someone out on their training program, and they now, they sort of publicly said, oh, we perhaps don't understand the course, and maybe we should talk. I said, yeah, we're going to talk. I'm not giving them free advice. This is, what am I getting? I'm getting access. I'm going to get insight. I might get some influence. I might get some, look, I'm strategic as well. It's like, you're saying, oh, look, help me. Well, I'm a consultant. Here's my, no, there's no money exchange. Okay. What am I coming to what am I getting? So I'm not naive, because if we're in a capitalist commercial system, then this has value. So equally, in the business context, it's not, I get it that it may be perceived, it may be in reality unpaid labor. But as I say, the Sanex example is, well, I know you just wasted 150K. So where's my cut if I solve this problem? And I say that, haha, but am I joking? Not joking, right? So not necessarily possible where you are or where you're coming from, but think about this. This is all, if you're coming at it from a commercial perspective, then there's money at stake from succeeding. I still remember Patti LaBelle's sweet potato pie in the US. That went crazy. People were fighting in Walmart for the last pie. And I think it was like a bakery buyer who was Black brought that to fore, because in America, most white people eat sweet potato, pumpkin pie, and Black and African American people eat sweet potato pie. And it's like, really? And guess what? Which one is more delicious? I'm just calling it like it is. So now everyone wants the pie that we have, and it's hilarious because now you want our pie. Yeah, we want our pie. So I'm telling that story being a bit flippant, but what if it's accretive? So that Patti LaBelle's making money, the buyer got promoted. So there are opportunities, but I get it. I'm not to be flippant or dismissive. It's not easy. So I think you got to live your own truth, and if that's not what you want to do, I respect it. But now I'm more conscious of what am I getting. If I'm going to give, what am I getting? And sometimes I may not. I choose to stay out of certain issues because you know what? That's your problem, not mine. Not every issue is mine to solve.
Great. Not every issue is ours to solve. And yet there are some where we can choose to step in. And I think that was a big lesson earlier this year for me and for many of us. We can't possibly respond to all the attacks and all the things that are happening, but picking and choosing those things that are important enough, or as you said, Gia, that resonate with you personally enough that you want to stand up and speak up, that's when you choose to do so. Gia, one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is across your roles at Clorox and now at Target, can you talk about what it looks like when DEI is embedded in business decisions and not just treated as a program or campaign that can be shelved?
Yes, but first I want to come back to what we were just talking about to build on what you said, Judy. Yes, when you're passionate about something, that's when you go after it and you speak out. But also, I want to make sure we understand that making a difference or doing something doesn't necessarily have to be speaking out, being outward, and loud and active that way, right? There's so many other things that you can do that might be more fitting for your personality or your situation, etc. So maybe you're not the person out there with the bullhorn or marching, but maybe you have organized and had all the logistics laid out for the protest. Maybe you made the posters. And that's just as effective. It's just as important as the people who are more vocal. There's a role for everybody, and it's not a diminished role to say there are reasons why I can't be the face of this campaign. There are reasons why I can't speak up. I can't say this thing, but know that there are other ways that you can be just as impactful.
Thank you for that. It's important that every role you play is significant and matters, not only the speaking roles. Before we wrap, I really would like to hear from each of you just kind of some lightning round type questions. Sam, I'll come to you first, but would you share one truth you're holding on to right now, and maybe one practice or mindset that helps you stay resilient?
Trust your intuition, which is one I shared earlier. Trust that feeling and that sixth sense, that deep knowledge, that truth that is talking to you, and don't ignore it. Listen to that voice. And then the other one I'd say to stay, and as a marketing reformer, that's my persona that I adopt. So it's speak truth to power with power. That's what I do, and that's what I'm going to put out to the world. And speak truth to power with power.
Thank you. Gia, would you share a truth you're holding on to and a practice or mindset that helps you stay resilient?
Truth. It will all work out in the end. I do ultimately believe that about everything that's happening right now. And the way that I stay resilient and grounded is to remember that when I align myself with the universe, everything will be okay in the end. Everything will align and good will come. So that's what I keep with me.
Thanks. And would each of you share maybe a challenge or an encouragement that you'd like to offer to other Black professionals or leaders? Sam?
Wow, you want more? They want more. The people want more.
The people want more.
I've given a lot of ideas. It's like they're lying down right now. Okay, I'm gonna give this because I do like this one. So this is he wasn't Black, but I adopted him. From Alvin Toffler said, "The illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read or write, but the ones that are not able to learn, unlearn, and relearn." So it's the idea of what can you learn, which is helpful, unlearn the stuff which isn't, and relearn. So learn, unlearn, relearn. That's for me the challenge. And I think this community has a strength in this space to actually do that. A lot of people talk about, oh, let's be more resilient. And I'm like, to every Black person, it's like, oh, you're going on resilience training? We've been doing that. Like huh? You need resilience. Like, oh, can we teach you resilience? So learn, unlearn, relearn.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that and appreciate your candor. Both you, Gia, and Sam have been so forthright in sharing your personal opinions. And I know our audience appreciates it, as I'm sure as much as I do. Kendra, I'd like to turn it back over to you just to wrap for us.
Great. So I would like to thank Gia, Judy, Sam for a lively discussion today. Just so you know, I understand the value of the webinar format, but I was sitting here in the background, doing all the reactions and all of that. So as we get back together in future sessions, I think we might be playing with the format a bit because I want to see the reactions. I want to see the back and forth real time. Just know you had me with the patty pies, and as you were talking about, when you're challenged as a leader, what do you do? What is the personal agency that we have? Thank you so much for the dedication of your time. To those who were able to join us today, thank you for dedicating an hour of your time for this discussion. Let's keep it going. We'll be posting on LinkedIn, Facebook. Let's stay connected. So thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest of
Thank
the day.
you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.